Before Hollywood learned that legends don't beg for roles, Sylvester Stallone thought he could pressure Clint Eastwood into joining the Expendables 3 during a private meeting in 2013. This is the story of how Stallone's desperate pitch to his childhood hero backfired so spectacularly that it exposed the difference between someone who chases legacy and someone who simply lives it. "Come on, Clint! This is your last chance to be part of something big!" Sylvester Stallone's voice echoed through the Malpaso Productions office as he leaned across the desk, his desperation barely contained. What had started as a respectful meeting between two legends was about to become the most humiliating rejection in Hollywood history, and Clint Eastwood hadn't even raised his voice yet. The Malpaso Productions office in Burbank had always been a sanctuary of understated professionalism, reflecting its owner's no-nonsense approach to filmmaking. On this humid afternoon in July 2013, the oak-paneled office felt more like a courtroom as Sylvester Stallone sat across from Clint Eastwood, clutching a leather-bound script like a lifeline. At 67, Stallone was still riding high from the success of the Expendables franchise, but the cracks were beginning to show. The second film had received brutal reviews, with critics dismissing it as geriatric action porn and questioning whether audiences still wanted to watch aging action stars pretend they were still in their prime. The third installment desperately needed credibility, and Stallone believed that credibility had a name: Clint Eastwood. Clint, at 83, sat behind his desk with the same calm presence that had defined his career for over 5 decades. He wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, his weathered hands folded calmly as he listened to Stallone's increasingly frantic pitch. The contrast between the two men was striking, one desperately chasing relevance, the other quietly embodying it. The meeting had been arranged through mutual contacts after months of Stallone's persistent requests. He had made it clear through intermediaries that he wasn't just asking for a favor, he was offering Clint a chance to cement his action legacy alongside the greatest action stars of multiple generations. It was exactly the kind of pitch that revealed how little Stallone understood the man he was trying to convince. Behind Stallone's enthusiasm lay a deeper desperation. The Expendables 3 was facing significant challenges. Several major stars had passed on the project, the budget was ballooning, and studio executives were expressing concerns about the franchise's direction. Stallone knew that landing Clint Eastwood wouldn't just solve his casting problems, it would validate the entire project and silence the critics who questioned his relevance in modern Hollywood. What Stallone failed to understand was that Clint Eastwood didn't need validation from anyone, least of all from a franchise that represented everything he had spent his career avoiding: noisy spectacle over substance, volume over nuance, desperation over dignity. The irony was palpable. Here was Stallone, trying to convince the man who had redefined the action genre through restraint and minimalism to join a project that celebrated everything opposite to those principles. It was like asking Mozart to join a garage band, not because the music was better, but because the garage band had more members. As Stallone launched into his prepared presentation, complete with concept art and projected box office numbers, Clint listened with the patience of someone who had heard every pitch imaginable over 6 decades in Hollywood. Stallone's presentation began professionally enough, with carefully prepared talking points about the franchise's global success and its celebration of action cinema's greatest heroes. He spoke about bringing together icons from different eras, creating an Avengers for action stars, and giving audiences one final chance to see their childhood heroes together on screen. "Think about it, Clint," Stallone said, his voice carrying the practiced enthusiasm of someone who had given this pitch many times before. "You, me, Schwarzenegger, Willis, all the guys who defined action cinema for generations. It's not just a movie, it's a cultural event." Clint listened without interruption, his expression giving nothing away. His silence wasn't rude, it was complete attention, the kind of focused listening that made people feel both heard and evaluated. But Stallone, accustomed to more enthusiastic responses, began to interpret the silence as resistance. "The money is incredible," Stallone continued, pulling out financial projections and foreign distribution deals. "We're talking about a guaranteed global audience of 200 million people. The merchandising alone could set up your grandkids for life. Still no response from Clint, just that steady, evaluating gaze that had made screen villains uncomfortable for decades. Stallone began to shift in his chair, his confidence wavering as he realized his prepared material wasn't landing as expected. "Look, I know you've got your own projects," Stallone said, his tone becoming more urgent. "But this is different. This is about legacy, about showing the world that we're not done yet, that age is just a number." The phrase, "age is just a number," hung in the air awkwardly. Here was a 67-year-old man trying to convince an 83-year-old that they needed to prove something to the world about aging gracefully. The condescension was unintentional but unmistakable. Stallone pressed on, growing more animated as he sensed the pitch slipping away. "We could write you the perfect role, the wise mentor, the master gunfighter, whatever you want. You'd have input on everything. Hell, you could probably direct your own scenes." That last comment revealed just how little Stallone understood his audience. Clint Eastwood, who had been directing Oscar-winning films since before The Expendables was even a concept, was being offered the chance to probably direct his own scenes in someone else's franchise film. The meeting had been going on for 20 minutes, and Clint still hadn't said more than, "Hello, Sly," and "Have a seat." His silence was becoming a presence in the room, growing heavier with each of Stallone's increasingly desperate arguments. Finally, unable to bear the quiet any longer, Stallone leaned forward and played what he thought was his trump card. The shift from professional pitch to personal plea happened gradually, then all at once. Stallone had exhausted his prepared material and found himself improvising, his carefully constructed presentation dissolving into something closer to begging. "Come on, Clint," he said, leaning forward across the desk with an intensity that made the office feel smaller. "When are we ever going to get another chance like this? I mean, let's be honest, we're not getting any younger here." The comment landed with a thud in the quiet office. Clint's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. Stallone had just told one of Hollywood's most active and successful octogenarians that time was running out for his career. But Stallone was too deep into his pitch to recognize the mistake. The desperation that had been simmering beneath his professionalism was now boiling over. "This could be your last chance to be part of something really big," he continued, his voice rising slightly. "I know you've got your art house stuff, your directing projects, but this is different. This is about giving the fans what they want." The phrase, "art house stuff," seemed to echo in the office like a slap. Stallone had just dismissed Clint's recent films, including his Oscar-nominated work, as niche projects for pretentious audiences. The man who had made Unforgiven, $1 Million Baby, and Gran Torino was being told he needed to join a franchise film to give fans what they want. "Look," Stallone said, pulling out his phone and showing Clint social media posts, "the fans are already going crazy about the possibility. Eastwood Expendables is trending. They want to see you with a gun again. They want the man with no name one more time." The irony was staggering. Stallone was telling the creator of some of cinema's most iconic characters that he needed to recreate them in someone else's movie to stay relevant. It was like telling Picasso he should consider doing some nice landscapes because that's what people really wanted to see. The most painful moment came when Stallone, sensing his pitch wasn't working, began to make it personal. "Clint, you were my hero growing up. The Dollars trilogy, Dirty Harry. That's what made me want to make action movies. This is your chance to pass the torch, to show your approval of what we're doing." The emotional manipulation was clumsy and obvious. Stallone was asking his childhood hero to validate his career by appearing in his movie, as if Clint's participation would somehow transfer legitimacy to the Expendables franchise. Then came the line that would define the entire meeting. "This is your last chance to be part of something big." The silence that followed Stallone's desperate plea lasted exactly 15 seconds, long enough for the full weight of what he had just said to settle in the office like dust after an explosion. Clint Eastwood sat perfectly still behind his desk, his hands still folded, his expression unchanged from the moment Stallone had begun his pitch. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet that Stallone had to lean forward to catch every word. But the quietness wasn't weakness. It was the controlled calm of someone who had just decided to deliver a lesson in dignity. "Sly," he said, and somehow the simple use of the nickname managed to sound both respectful and dismissive at the same time. "You've been talking for 30 minutes about legacy and last chances and giving fans what they want." He paused, not for dramatic effect, but with the measured timing of someone who understood that words, once spoken, could never be taken back. "But there's something you don't seem to understand about being a legend." Stallone's confident expression began to waver as he realized that Clint's response wasn't going to be the enthusiastic acceptance he had expected, or even the polite rejection he had feared. This was something else entirely. "Legends don't chase relevance," Clint continued, his voice never rising above conversational level, but somehow commanding the entire office's attention. "They don't need to prove they're still vital by joining other people's projects. And they sure as hell don't have last chances. They make their own chances." The reversal was swift and surgical. In less than 30 seconds, Clint had transformed Stallone's pitch from a generous opportunity into evidence of his own insecurity. The man who had presented himself as offering Clint a lifeline had been revealed as someone drowning in his own need for validation. But Clint wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair, his posture casual but his words precise. "You called my recent work art house stuff," he said, with just the hint of amusement in his voice. "I've made 4 films in the last 5 years. They've grossed over $400 million worldwide and earned 12 Oscar nominations. That's not art house, Sly. That's knowing your audience." The statistics hung in the air like a judgment. While Stallone had been chasing youth demographics with increasingly desperate action spectacles, Clint had been quietly creating films that connected with audiences across all age groups and earned both critical acclaim and commercial success. The final blow was delivered with surgical precision. "The difference between us, Sly, is that you're still trying to prove you matter. I just do work that matters." The immediate aftermath of Clint's response was unlike anything Stallone had experienced in decades of Hollywood meetings. The 67-year-old action star, who had pitched his project with the confidence of someone offering a generous opportunity, now sat in stunned silence as the full impact of the rejection became clear. Clint's dismissal hadn't been cruel or personal. It had been something far more devastating, completely reasonable. Every point Stallone had made about legacy and relevance had been quietly but thoroughly dismantled by someone who actually embodied those qualities rather than chasing them. "I appreciate you thinking of me," Clint continued, his tone returning to the polite professionalism that had characterized the beginning of their meeting. "But I'm not interested in being part of something big. I'm interested in making something good." The distinction was subtle but profound. Stallone had spent 30 minutes talking about box office numbers, global audiences, and cultural events. Clint had responded by talking about the work itself, the difference between spectacle and substance, between noise and meaning. Stallone attempted one last weak protest. "But the fans, Clint, they want to see you back in action. They're asking for it." Clint's response was gentle but final. "The fans who matter already know where to find me. I've got a new film coming out next year. If they want to see me in action, they can buy a ticket." The meeting was effectively over, though both men maintained the courtesies expected of Hollywood professionals. Stallone gathered his materials, the concept art, the financial projections, the social media screenshots, all of which now seemed embarrassingly desperate in the wake of Clint's quiet rejection. As Stallone prepared to leave, Clint offered one final comment that would haunt him for years. "Sly, you don't need me to validate your work. If the Expendables means something to people, it'll succeed on its own merit. If it doesn't, having me in it won't change that." The wisdom was delivered without condescension, but its implications were clear. Stallone had been seeking external validation for a project he wasn't confident could stand on its own. He had confused star power with storytelling power, mistaking celebrity for substance. The drive back to his office gave Stallone plenty of time to replay the meeting in his mind. He had entered Clint's office believing he was offering a legend one last chance at relevance. He left understanding that he had been the one begging for legitimacy from someone who had never needed to ask for it. The Expendables 3 would eventually be made without Clint Eastwood, and its lukewarm reception would prove his point about substance over spectacle. 6 months after the meeting at Malpaso Productions, The Expendables 3 was released to mixed reviews and disappointing box office numbers. Critics noted the absence of major stars and questioned whether the franchise had run its course. Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood's American Sniper was breaking box office records and earning Oscar nominations, proving that audiences were hungry for substance over spectacle. The contrast between the two projects became a case study in Hollywood's ongoing struggle between commercial formula and artistic integrity. While The Expendables 3 relied on nostalgia and star power, American Sniper succeeded by telling a compelling story with emotional depth and moral complexity. For Stallone, the Rejection had been a harsh lesson in the difference between confidence and desperation. His attempt to recruit Clint had exposed his own insecurities about aging, relevance, and legacy. The man who had built his career on characters who fought against impossible odds had been reduced to begging for validation from his childhood hero. The entertainment industry took notice of the dynamic. Trade publications began writing about the Eastwood standard, the idea that true legends don't chase trends or beg for inclusion in other people's projects. They create their own opportunities and let their work speak for itself. In interviews following The Expendables 3's release, Stallone was repeatedly asked about Clint's absence from the cast. His responses grew more diplomatic over time, eventually settling on, "Clint has his own vision and his own projects. We respect that." But those close to him knew that the rejection had stung deeply, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own career trajectory. Perhaps most significantly, the meeting marked a turning point in how Hollywood viewed the relationship between age and relevance. Clint's continued success into his 80s proved that audiences didn't want to see aging stars pretending to be young. They wanted to see mature artists creating work that reflected their experience and wisdom. The lesson extended beyond Hollywood. In an industry and a culture obsessed with youth and novelty, Clint Eastwood had reminded everyone that true value comes from consistency, integrity, and the confidence to say no to projects that don't serve your artistic vision. Years later, when film historians analyzed the careers of both men, the meeting at Malpaso Productions was cited as a defining moment, not because of what was said, but because of what it revealed about the difference between chasing legacy and actually having one. The man who begged for validation learned that legends don't need permission to matter. They just matter. Have you ever seen desperation defeated by quiet confidence? Share your story in the comments below.
Don't forget to hit the like button if you liked the video and subscribe if you want videos like this to come. See you in the next story.